Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want you to stop whatever you're doing, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a wake-up call. Imagine dedicating your entire life to your family. Cooking, cleaning, caring, sacrificing everything you have. Only to realize one day that no one even sees you. That no one even notices when you're falling apart. What if the people you loved the most only realized your worth when it was too late? Today, I'm going to tell you the unbelievable, heartbreaking, yet inspiring story of Revenge Amanda, a 65-year-old woman who spent her whole life putting everyone else first. Until one day, she disappeared without a word and changed everything. By the time her family realized what they had lost, Amanda had already built an entirely new life. A life of freedom, beauty, and peace. So, make sure you listen till the very end, because this is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about rediscovery, self-worth, and how sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. Let's begin. Amanda Blake had spent her entire life putting others first. For 65 years, she lived in the shadows of her family. Cooking, cleaning, caring, giving everything she had without ever asking for anything in return. But one cold Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. That was the day the doctor slid a file across the table. His expression grave, and told her she had breast cancer. The words felt like ice water poured over her soul. Cancer. A word she'd only heard in hushed conversations or on hospital pamphlets, now stamped across her life like a sentence. She left the hospital that day clutching the medical report, her hands shaking, her mind spinning. But when she stepped back into her house, she didn't know how to tell anyone. So she didn't. Instead, she laid the report on the coffee table in the living room, the same table her family gathered around every day. She thought surely someone would notice. Surely, her husband Arthur would pause between reading the newspaper and sipping his tea. Maybe her grown children David and Sophie, who visited almost every evening, would glance down and ask, "Mom, what's this?" But the paper sat there for 3 whole days, untouched, unnoticed, invisible. Just like Amanda had always been. During those 3 days she kept moving. Like clockwork. Folding laundry, making beds, vacuuming the floors, picking up her grandchildren, Zach and Olivia, from school. No one suspected that inside she was falling apart. On the 4th day, she had a follow-up appointment at the hospital. It ran longer than expected, and by the time she walked out, dusk had already started to fall. She carried a small paper bag of medication in one hand and groceries in the other, trying to balance the weight of her reality. Her phone started buzzing wildly in her coat pocket, but the bus was packed, and she barely had room to breathe, let alone answer. When she finally answered, her daughter-in-law Leona's sharp voice cut through the line like a knife. "Amanda, why haven't you picked up Zach from school?" his teacher called. "He's the last kid left, crying his eyes out." "Where the hell are you?" Amanda tried to explain, her voice trembling. "I told David this morning. I had a doctor's appointment. He was supposed to pick up Zach." But Leona didn't let her finish. "Oh my God, Amanda. What could possibly be more important than your grandson?" The call ended with accusations and frustration, not a single question about her health. Minutes later, her son David called. His voice filled with irritation. "Mom, what's going on with you? Zach's still at school. Leona's upset. Dad's wondering why you're not home making dinner." Amanda stood there on that crowded bus, her heart pounding, the weight of their words crashing down heavier than the groceries in her hands. None of them had noticed the report. None of them had asked how she was. All they cared about was that dinner wasn't ready, that the kids hadn't been picked up. And at that moment, Amanda realized something terrifying. She could be dying, and her family wouldn't even notice. Amanda Blake had spent her entire life putting others first. For 65 years, she lived in the shadows of her family. Cooking, cleaning, caring, giving everything she had without ever asking for anything in return. But one cold Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. That was the day the doctor slid a file across the table. His expression grave, and told her she had breast cancer. The words felt like ice water poured over her soul. Cancer. A word she'd only heard in hushed conversations or on hospital pamphlets, now stamped across her life like a sentence. She left the hospital that day clutching the medical report, her hands shaking, her mind spinning. But when she stepped back into her house, she didn't know how to tell anyone. So she didn't. Instead, she laid the report on the coffee table in the living room, the same table her family gathered around every day. She thought surely someone would notice. Surely, her husband Arthur would pause between reading the newspaper and sipping his tea. Maybe her grown children David and Sophie, who visited almost every evening, would glance down and ask, "Mom, what's this?" But the paper sat there for 3 whole days, untouched, unnoticed, invisible, just like Amanda had always been. During those 3 days she kept moving, like clockwork, folding laundry, making beds, vacuuming the floors, picking up her grandchildren, Zach and Olivia, from school. No one suspected that inside she was falling apart. On the 4th day, she had a follow-up appointment at the hospital. It ran longer than expected, and by the time she walked out, dusk had already started to fall. She carried a small paper bag of medication in one hand and groceries in the other, trying to balance the weight of her reality. Her phone started buzzing wildly in her coat pocket, but the bus was packed, and she barely had room to breathe, let alone answer. When she finally answered, her daughter-in-law Leona's sharp voice cut through the line like a knife. "Amanda, why haven't you picked up Zach from school?" his teacher called. "He's the last kid left, crying his eyes out." "Where the hell are you?" Amanda tried to explain, her voice trembling. "I told David this morning. I had a doctor's appointment. He was supposed to pick up Zach." But Leona didn't let her finish. "Oh my God, Amanda. What could possibly be more important than your grandson?" The call ended with accusations and frustration, not a single question about her health. Minutes later, her son David called, his voice filled with irritation. "Mom, what's going on with you? Zach's still at school. Leona's upset. Dad's wondering why you're not home making dinner." Amanda stood there on that crowded bus, her heart pounding, the weight of their words crashing down heavier than the groceries in her hands. None of them had noticed the report. None of them had asked how she was. All they cared about was that dinner wasn't ready, that the kids hadn't been picked up. And at that moment, Amanda realized something terrifying. She could be dying, and her family wouldn't even notice. The bus rattled beneath Amanda's feet, packed with tired commuters staring blankly at their phones, lost in their own worlds. She stood wedged between a pair of students and an office worker, her grocery bag digging into her arm, the weight of her small pharmacy bag pressing against her side. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, but inside Amanda's chest, something was crumbling. As the bus rolled past stop after stop, her mind wasn't on the road. It was spinning backward through years, decades, a lifetime that now felt like someone else's story. For 40 years, Amanda had lived in service to others. Arthur Blake, her husband, had been the picture of refinement. Director of the city's art museum, adored by the community, respected by colleagues. People called him elegant, sophisticated, a man of taste. Amanda used to believe that too. She thought she was lucky to stand beside a man like that. But what no one ever saw was the machinery behind the curtain, the woman who kept every piece of his life running. She had been the one who made sure the laundry was folded, the fridge was stocked, the bills were paid, and the house was spotless. Arthur had never so much as washed a dish or boiled an egg. He spent his days immersed in gallery openings, book clubs, and retirement socials. Amanda spent hers in the kitchen behind the vacuum, picking up after everyone. Their grown children, David and Sophie, were no better. Both married now, both living just a few blocks away. Yet every single day they relied on Amanda like she was an unpaid, on-call maid. It had become routine. Amanda would pick up her grandkids, Zach and Olivia, from school, cook dinner for the entire family, clean up afterward, and do it all again the next day. And what happened the one day she didn't? One missed school pickup, one dinner not on the table. And suddenly, Amanda had become the villain in her own home. Their voices echoed in her head, sharp and unrelenting. "How could you forget Zach? What's wrong with you lately? You're supposed to take care of us." Not one person had asked why she'd been late. Not one had thought to ask if she was okay. If she was tired. If maybe, just maybe, something was wrong. Amanda gripped the metal pole tighter, her knuckles white. It hit her like a slap to the face. She wasn't a person to them. She was a role, duty, convenience. All these years, she thought love looked like cooking dinner, folding clothes, and wiping tears. But now she realized she had been nothing more than the furniture in their lives. Always there, always expected, never truly seen. As the bus jerked forward, she closed her eyes and swallowed the lump in her throat. For the first time in her life, Amanda wasn't sure if anyone would notice if she disappeared. And that thought chilled her more than the cancer ever could. By the time Amanda pushed open the front door that night, it was already past 10. She stepped inside, exhausted from the hospital, the crowded bus, and the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. But what greeted her wasn't peace. It was chaos. The living room looked like a battlefield. Empty takeout boxes and crumpled napkins littered the coffee table. Greasy plates stacked high in the sink. The TV blared in the background, some mindless show flickering across the screen. On the couch, David and Sophie lounged lazily, scrolling through their phones while their children, Zach and Olivia, sat cross-legged on the floor, glued to their tablets, surrounded by half-eaten snacks. Amanda's stomach tightened, but she said nothing. She wasn't surprised. This was how they always left the house when she wasn't there to clean up after them. But it wasn't the mess that shattered her. As she quietly made her way to the bedroom, hoping to change clothes and escape the noise, she stopped dead in her tracks. Standing there in the hallway, barefoot and wearing a silk robe, was Vivian. Vivian Summers. Arthur's old flame. The woman who had once been the star of the East Coast Ballet Conservatory. The woman Amanda had spent her whole marriage trying not to think about. Vivian's eyes widened when she saw Amanda, but she recovered quickly, offering a soft, apologetic smile. "Oh, Amanda. I'm back. I was just feeling a little dizzy earlier. Arthur said I could lie down in your room for a while. I hope you don't mind." Her voice was sweet, concerned even, but Amanda felt her heart drop like a stone. Before she could respond, Arthur appeared behind Vivian, smoothing down his shirt sleeves like nothing was out of place. "Clara, you're home late," he said coolly. "We were getting worried." Sophie's voice rang out from the couch, sharp and impatient. "Mom, what's gotten into you lately? You've been so emotional." Vivian wasn't feeling well. Dad was just being polite. "Don't make a scene." David chimed in too, not even looking up from his phone. "Honestly, Mom, you've been acting strange all week. You're blowing things out of proportion. Can you just calm down for once?" Amanda stared at them, her husband, her children, even her grandchildren still locked into their little screens, and felt something crack inside her. It wasn't Vivian's presence that broke her heart. It was the realization that no one in this house saw her anymore. Not as a woman, not as a partner, not even as a mother or grandmother. She was just a fixture, a background character, someone to cook and clean and smile politely. And tonight, they hadn't even tried to hide how easily she could be replaced. Amanda's hands curled into fists at her sides, but she said nothing. The ache in her chest was louder than any words she could scream. That was the night she knew. The home she had built, the family she had sacrificed everything for, had never really been hers. That night, long after the laughter and noise in the living room had died down, Amanda stood alone in the darkened hallway, staring at the closed door of the master bedroom, the bedroom that had stopped being hers a long time ago. She had spent her whole life in this house, folding laundry, cooking meals, cleaning up everyone's mess, sacrificing piece by piece until there was nothing left of her except the woman everyone depended on, but no one really saw. Tonight, something inside her snapped. Slowly, methodically, Amanda walked back to the bedroom and flicked on the light. The empty bed stared back at her like a cruel joke. Without hesitation, she opened the closet and pulled out a small suitcase from the back, one she hadn't used in years. She packed only what she needed, Some clothes, her documents, her medications. No keepsakes, no mementos. She realized there was nothing in this house worth taking. Her hands moved with a calmness she didn't recognize, like her body had already made the decision before her mind caught up. When the bag was zipped shut, she sat at the edge of the bed and picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a long moment. Then finally she typed one simple message and sent it to the family group chat. Taking a break. Don't look for me. That was it. No explanations. No apologies. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin as she quietly wheeled her suitcase down the driveway. No one noticed her leaving. No one heard the front door close behind her. She hailed a taxi, and when the driver asked where she was going, she answered without hesitation. The airport. It wasn't until she was sitting in the back seat, the city lights blurring past the window, that she let herself breathe. She didn't know where she was going exactly. She hadn't made a plan. But as the taxi sped through the streets, Amanda realized she didn't need one. For decades, every decision she had made revolved around her family. What they needed, what they wanted, how she could make their lives easier. And tonight, for the first time in 65 years, she wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about herself. At the airport, she stood in front of the departure board, watching the names of cities flicker and change. Her eyes stopped at one, Portland, a place she'd always dreamed of visiting. She'd once mentioned it casually over dinner years ago, saying she wanted to see the rose gardens, the parks, the ocean air. Arthur had waved her off back then, saying it was too far, too expensive, too impractical. Amanda smiled faintly to herself. It wasn't too far tonight. She walked up to the counter and bought a last-minute ticket on the next flight to Portland. Felt reckless, wild, free. As she sat by the boarding gate, waiting to leave behind everything she had ever known, she checked her phone one last time. A flurry of missed calls and text messages had already started coming in. David, Sophie, Arthur, Leona, all of them. Where are you? Why aren't you home? Who's going to cook dinner tomorrow? Not a single message asked if she was okay. Amanda turned the phone off and tucked it deep into her bag. She wasn't their maid. She wasn't their caretaker. She wasn't their emotional punching bag. Not anymore. When the boarding call echoed through the airport, Amanda stood up, lifted her suitcase, and walked toward the gate without looking back. For the first time in her life, she was finally choosing herself. When the plane touched down in Portland just before dawn, Amanda stepped off with nothing but her small suitcase and a heart that felt strangely light. The city was still cloaked in a soft, sleepy mist, the air crisp and cool. For the first time in decades, she wasn't rushing to make breakfast or answer anyone's call. She was simply there, free. She checked into a small, elegant hotel downtown. The kind of place she would have once dismissed as too expensive, too indulgent. But this time she didn't hesitate. When the front desk clerk asked if she needed help with her bags, Amanda smiled politely and shook her head. She could carry her own weight now. That afternoon, she walked into an upscale restaurant she'd heard about years ago on a travel show. A place her husband and children had always talked about but never once invited her to. She sat by the window, ordered the chef's special, and for the first time in her life, ate a meal without worrying about the cost or whether someone else would approve. She savored every bite slowly, deliberately, each mouthful tasting like a rebellion. After dinner, Amanda didn't go back to the hotel immediately. She wandered the streets of Portland, watching the city come alive in the evening glow. People walked past her laughing, holding hands, living. And Amanda realized how much life she had missed while she'd been trapped in that house, invisible and exhausted. The next morning, she did something even more outrageous, something her old self would never have dared to do. She hired a private tour guide, a young woman named Grace, full of energy, her smile warm and unpretentious. Grace asked what Amanda wanted to see, and without thinking, Amanda replied, "Everything." They walked through the Portland Japanese garden, the crisp scent of pine and cherry blossoms lingering in the air. They strolled by the waterfront, Amanda's scarf fluttering in the breeze. They even stopped at a little art gallery tucked away on a side street, where Amanda stood frozen in front of a canvas for nearly 10 minutes, her heart quietly cracking open at the sight of the colors. Grace, noticing how Amanda lit up around the flowers and the paintings, suggested something bold. "Why don't you let me take some photos of you?" she said gently. "You deserve to see yourself the way the world sees you." First, Amanda laughed it off. She was too old, too plain, too invisible. But Grace insisted, so Amanda agreed. That afternoon, for the first time in her life, Amanda stood in front of a camera, not as someone's mother or wife or grandmother, but as herself. Grace snapped photos of her laughing in the gardens, sipping coffee by the river, and staring at the city skyline with a quiet, fierce determination. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Amanda's phone kept buzzing relentlessly. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from David, Sophie, Arthur. All variations of the same thing. "Where are you? When are you coming home? Who's going to cook dinner tomorrow?" Amanda scrolled through them silently, her face unreadable. Then, without a second thought, she opened her settings and blocked every single number. It was shockingly easy. As the days passed, something inside her began to shift. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing felt easier. Even the dull ache in her chest, the heaviness she'd carried for years, started to fade. She realized it wasn't just the cancer that had been killing her. It was them. It was that house, that life. And now that she had stepped away, she could finally see the truth. On her last day in Portland, as she sat by the river watching the sun melt into the horizon, Amanda smiled to herself and made a quiet promise. She wasn't just running away. She was reclaiming her life. And this was only the beginning. Before we continue, I want to pause for a moment and ask you, what would you do if you were Amanda? Would you have the courage to walk away, to choose yourself after a lifetime of being taken for granted? Tell me in the comments below. How does this story make you feel so far? Do you feel angry for Amanda? Or maybe inspired by her decision? I read every single comment, and I'd love to know what's going through your mind right now. Alright, let's get back to Amanda's incredible journey. Back home, the world Amanda had left behind unraveled faster than anyone expected. At first, her family treated her absence like an inconvenience, assuming she'd come crawling back after a few days. They complained in their group chat. They mocked her message about taking a break. They joked that she was probably hiding out at a friend's house, sulking, waiting for them to beg. But then the real cracks began to show. Without Amanda, the house descended into chaos. The laundry piled up. The sink overflowed with dirty dishes. Grocery lists were forgotten. Zach and Olivia missed school pickups. Meals became scattered takeouts and microwave dinners. No one knew where the insurance papers were. No one knew when the bills were due. No one knew how to make the household function, because Amanda had always done it all, quietly, without complaint. It didn't take long before the cracks became full-blown fractures. Arthur, who had spent his whole life living in carefully curated elegance, couldn't cope with the disorder. He tried to keep everything running, but he wasn't built for it. He'd never even ironed his own shirts. One night, after eating greasy takeout and drinking too much wine, his stomach condition flared up violently. At 3 a.m, David had to rush him to the hospital with severe abdominal pain. The man who had once ruled the house like a king now lay curled on a hospital bed, hooked to IVs, too weak to argue. That's when panic truly set in. Sophie and David scrambled to fix what was falling apart. They hired a housekeeper, but she couldn't cook the way Amanda did. They hired a nanny, but she didn't know the children's routines, their favorite snacks, their bedtime quirks. Olivia threw tantrums. Zach refused to eat. The housekeeper quit after 3 days. They realized, far too late, that Amanda hadn't just been a housewife. She had been the glue holding everything together. The family group chat exploded with desperate messages. David sent long, rambling apologies. Sophie tried to call over and over again. Even Arthur, stubborn and proud, typed out clumsy, half-hearted texts from his hospital bed. Amanda didn't respond to a single one. The calls became voicemails. The voicemails turned into pleading messages from the grandchildren. Tiny, shaky voices left recordings saying, "Grandma, we miss you. Please come home. Mommy and Daddy don't know how to make spaghetti like you do." Amanda listened to those recordings once, alone in her hotel room overlooking the Portland skyline. She let the words sink in. Let the guilt knock gently at the door. And then she silenced her phone and tucked it away. Because she finally understood. They didn't miss her. They missed what she did for them. They missed the machine she had become, the free labor, the emotional cushion. Not Amanda. Not the woman. Not the person. Back in Portland, Amanda woke up every morning without a list of chores waiting for her. She walked through rose gardens. She took photos of sunsets. She ate breakfast slowly, for the first time in her life, without anyone telling her she was late. And as her body grew lighter, her breathing easier, she realized something stunning. Her health was improving, not because of doctors or medicine, but because for the first time in 65 years, she wasn't drowning in other people's needs. For the first time in her life, Amanda was free. And she wasn't going back. When Amanda finally stepped back onto the familiar pavement outside her old house, it wasn't because she missed it. It wasn't because she missed them. She had come back for one reason only, to end it. The sky was overcast that day, the air thick with the weight of something unfinished. Amanda rolled her suitcase behind her, not because she planned to stay, but because she wanted them to see it, to understand that she wasn't returning. She was leaving. The door swung open before she even reached for the handle. Sophie stood there wide-eyed, relief washing over her face like a tidal wave. "Mom, you're back!" she cried, pulling Amanda inside before she could say a word. Inside, the entire family was waiting like a jury. David, Leona, Arthur sitting stiffly in an armchair, Zach and Olivia perched on the couch, their little faces nervous and confused. "You gave us such a scare," David said quickly. "You can't just run away like that. We've been falling apart without you." Amanda said nothing. "You've made your point, Mom," Sophie added, forcing a smile. "We get it. You needed a break. But everything's better now. We cleaned the house. We can hire more help. You don't have to worry anymore." Arthur cleared his throat, his voice softer than usual. "Amanda, you've made your statement. You've punished us enough. It's time to come home." Amanda looked around at them, all these people she had spent her life serving, sacrificing for, and felt nothing. She placed her suitcase by the door, took a deep breath, and finally spoke. "I'm not here to stay," she said quietly, but her voice carried like a thunderclap. "I came to tell you I want a divorce." The room froze. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Sophie's face twisted in disbelief. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're 65 years old. You're not thinking clearly." David stood up, his voice tight. "You've always been emotional, but this is extreme. What will people say? What about Dad?" Arthur's face darkened, but Amanda noticed the flicker of panic in his eyes. "You're not serious," he said flatly. Amanda met his gaze without flinching. "I've never been more serious." The room erupted. Leona chimed in, accusing Amanda of being selfish. Sophie pleaded, saying the grandchildren needed her. David ranted about how she was tearing the family apart over one argument, one vacation. Amanda listened in silence, letting their noise bounce off her like rain against stone. When they finally ran out of breath, she spoke again, calm but sharp. "I have my own assets. 2 properties my parents left me. Savings you never cared to ask about. And now, I have something far more valuable than any of that: peace. I don't owe any of you anything." Arthur stared at her, his mouth slightly open as if seeing her for the first time. "You can't do this," he said quietly, almost pleading now. "What will you do without us?" Amanda let out a small, bitter laugh. "I think the real question is, what will you do without me?" She turned toward the door, her hand on the suitcase handle. "I've spent 40 years giving this family every piece of me. And when I stopped, everything collapsed. That tells me everything I need to know." Without another word, she walked out the door, the suitcase wheels clicking softly behind her like a metronome marking the end of an era. She didn't look back. This time she wasn't leaving to take a break. She was leaving for good. Amanda's new apartment was nothing grand. Just a small, sunlit place tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. No marble countertops, no expensive artwork hanging on the walls. Only peace, simplicity, and space that belonged entirely to her. For the first time in her life, the silence felt comforting, not lonely. There were no footsteps stomping down the hallway, no ringing phones demanding dinner or favors. Just the soft hum of the city outside her window and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. She spent her mornings taking slow walks to the park, sipping coffee in cafes she'd never allowed herself to enter before. She didn't have to explain to anyone where she was going or when she'd be back. And slowly, Amanda began to live. A few weeks after the divorce papers were finalized, she met Grace again. It happened almost by accident. Amanda had reached out one evening, sending a polite message to the young woman who had once offered her a tissue on a crowded bus, the first person in years who had asked if she was okay. They met for lunch at a small cafe downtown. Grace greeted her with a bright smile, the same warmth Amanda had remembered. "You look different," Grace said after they sat down. Amanda smiled faintly. "I feel different." They talked for hours. Amanda told her everything. About the marriage, the children, the cancer, the quiet prison she had lived in for decades. And Grace listened without judgment, without pity. She listened like a daughter would. Over the next few weeks, they began meeting regularly. Lunches turned into walks. Walks turned into long conversations about life, about dreams, about the years Amanda thought she had wasted. One afternoon, Grace said something that caught Amanda off guard. "You know," she said softly, "you've spent your whole life taking care of people who didn't care for you, but you've never stopped being a mother. Maybe it's time to choose who deserves that part of you." That night, Amanda lay awake, thinking about Grace's words. The next day, she made her decision. When they met again, Amanda took Grace's hand across the cafe table. "You don't have family here," she said quietly. "And I don't have anyone left who sees me. So if you'd like, I'd like to make this official. I want you to be my goddaughter." Grace's eyes filled with tears, and without hesitation, she nodded. It wasn't blood, but it was family. With Grace by her side, Amanda began to rebuild not just her life, but herself. One afternoon, while they were clearing out the last boxes in her apartment, Grace stumbled upon an old, dusty wooden box. Inside were brushes, tubes of paint, and a few small, forgotten canvases. "You used to paint?" Grace asked, lifting one of the brushes carefully. Amanda hesitated, her fingers grazing the brittle edges of the canvas. "A long time ago, before I became a wife. Before I became invisible." "You should start again," Grace urged gently. That night, Amanda set up a small easel by her window. She dipped the brush into the paint with trembling fingers and touched the canvas for the first time in decades. The lines were shaky at first, her hands stiff. But as the days passed, something inside her softened. The colors started to flow. The fear, the bitterness, the exhaustion she had carried for so long, all of it poured onto the canvas. And then Grace had another idea. "You should share these," she said one evening. "People need to see them." Amanda shook her head at first. She wasn't ready for the world to know her name. So they created an anonymous account online, Ink and Grace. She posted her paintings quietly, without fanfare. Landscapes, flowers, abstract emotions poured out in color. No selfies, no personal stories, just art. First no one noticed. Then, slowly people began to follow. A woman from Italy left a comment saying Amanda's painting reminded her of her childhood home. A young girl in Brazil messaged, saying the colors made her feel hopeful again. Day by day, Amanda watched the numbers grow, not because she was anyone's mother or wife, but because of who she was when she finally painted her own story. For the first time in her life, Amanda wasn't someone's housekeeper or caretaker or afterthought. She was an artist. And this time, she belonged only to herself. Months passed. Amanda's life was nothing like it had been before. The days were quiet but purposeful, filled with painting, walks in the park, and dinners with Grace, who had become her true family. She still went for regular hospital checkups, keeping her health in check, but even the doctors noticed how much stronger she looked, how much lighter her steps were. She had stopped wondering about Arthur, David, Sophie, or the grandchildren. She had stopped checking her old phone, stopped expecting anyone to care. Until one afternoon, everything came crashing back. Amanda was sitting in the hospital waiting room, quietly flipping through a magazine after a routine scan when she heard a commotion down the hallway. Familiar voices rising in panic. She looked up, and there they were. Arthur, David, Sophie, and even Leona, stumbling toward her like ghosts from a past she had thought she buried. Their faces were pale, panicked, desperate. Arthur reached her first, out of breath. "Amanda, why didn't you tell us?" he said, his voice shaking. "The report, we found it." Amanda's heart went still. Sophie stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "We didn't know, Mom. We didn't know you were sick." David's voice cracked. "Why didn't you say anything? How could you hide this from us?" It took her a moment to understand. They had found the old medical report, the one she had left sitting on the coffee table, ignored, unread, invisible like she had always been. They had finally noticed. But it was too late. Amanda's expression didn't change. She closed the magazine slowly and stood up, facing them without a trace of warmth. "Now you care," she said quietly. "Now you're here." Arthur swallowed hard. "We didn't mean to." She cut him off. "You didn't mean to ignore me when I left it in plain sight. You didn't mean to overlook me every single day of your lives. You only noticed I was missing when dinner wasn't on the table, when your lives fell apart without me." Her words sliced through the air like knives. David stepped forward, pleading. "Mom, we made mistakes. But we can fix this. You shouldn't be going through this alone." Amanda shook her head. "I'm not alone." Just then, Grace appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying Amanda's coat and a small bag of prescriptions. She walked up beside Amanda without hesitation, slipping her arm gently through hers. "I have family," Amanda said, her voice calm but final. "The kind I chose." Sophie's face crumbled. "We're your family." Amanda met her eyes, unblinking. "Family doesn't mean people who only see you when they need something." The hallway went quiet. Arthur looked smaller now, hollowed out. "We're sorry," he said softly. "We didn't know how much we depended on you." Amanda gave a bitter smile. "No, you didn't. And now you do." Without another word, she turned and walked away, Grace matching her steps. Behind them, her family stood frozen, too stunned to speak. As they reached the elevator, Grace glanced at her. "Are you okay?" Amanda exhaled slowly. "For the first time in a long time. I am." The elevator doors closed. Years passed like pages quietly turning in a book Amanda thought she'd never get to finish. Her cancer went into remission, and with each day, her body grew stronger, not just from treatment but from peace. She spent her mornings painting by the window, her afternoons walking with Grace or exploring new galleries. And her nights were finally hers, no longer filled with chores or empty arguments, but with silence, with color, with freedom. Her online art account, Ink and Grace, flourished quietly at first, then beautifully. Strangers from around the world commented on her paintings, drawn to the raw emotion in every brushstroke, the quiet strength in every canvas. Many messaged her privately, older women especially, saying how her work made them believe it wasn't too late for them either. Amanda never posted her face. She didn't need to. Her art spoke enough. And then, on the eve of her 67th birthday, she did something she never imagined. She held her first solo art exhibition. The gallery walls were lined with her paintings, landscapes drenched in emotion, portraits that told silent stories, abstract pieces bursting with color and pain and healing. A banner above the entrance read, "Ink and Grace. A life reclaimed." The night of the opening, the gallery buzzed with energy. People Amanda had never met shook her hand, praised her work, told her how much her paintings meant to them. She stood in the middle of the crowd, wearing a soft gray dress, her hair neatly pinned back, her smile quiet but undeniable. She wasn't the woman who once shuffled between kitchen and laundry room. She wasn't invisible anymore. Toward the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned, Amanda noticed familiar faces at the entrance. Arthur, David, Sophie, even Leona. They stood awkwardly near the doorway, eyes wide as they took in the paintings, the banners, the people gathered around her. Arthur approached first. His once straight posture had bent a little with age. His eyes were softer, heavier. "You've changed," he said quietly, stopping in front of her. Amanda met his gaze, calm and unmoved. "No, I've always been like this. You just never looked." He hesitated, then glanced around the gallery. "I used to think I lost you because of Vivian. But I realize now, I lost you long before that. I lost you the day I stopped seeing you." Amanda smiled, not bitter, not angry. "It was free. We're just old acquaintances now, Arthur," she said softly. "Nothing more." David and Sophie stepped closer, as if searching for the woman they once knew, but finding a stranger instead. A woman vibrant, joyful, whole. They didn't say much. What was there to say? The apology they owed her was too large, too late. Amanda politely nodded, then excused herself to greet another guest. As the evening drew to a close, she stood by the gallery doors, suitcase in hand. Not because she was leaving town, but because tonight marked something far bigger. She was walking away from everything that had once kept her small. Outside, the air was cool and sweet. The streetlights glowed softly, the world quiet around her. Grace appeared at her side, slipping her arm through Amanda's. "Are you ready?" Grace asked. Amanda smiled, her heart light, her future wide open. "I've never been more ready." And together they walked into the night. Not a woman who had been abandoned, but a woman who had finally chosen herself. Her suitcase was light. Her name was her own again. Her life finally belonged to her. And Amanda didn't look back. And that's the story of Revenge Amanda, the woman who spent her entire life giving everything to her family, until she finally decided to give something back to herself. If there's one lesson to take away from this story, it's this. Never wait for others to recognize your worth. Sometimes the people closest to us won't appreciate what we do until we stop doing it. And by then it might be too late. Your time, your energy, your peace, those are priceless. And you deserve to live a life that belongs to you. Thank you so much for listening until the end. Now I want to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was it sad? Empowering? Did it remind you of someone you know? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because I have so many more powerful, emotional stories waiting for you in the next videos. Take care and remember, your story matters too.